Look at these pictures every day. Dead people. Dead people. I see dead people. Yeah, apartheid was bad. Yeah, that was bad. But dead people. It's like if it were the other way around, the media would be reporting it. Really? Like white America would not be reporting on the deaths of thousands of white people in South Africa? Really? Honestly? They would hide that kind of thing? I mean, again, I'm telling you, it's just we're being gaslit here. I mean, but this is the thing. Donald Trump is an impossible man to deal with when you're broke, as I tweeted earlier on. I only knew you can tell him where the hell to get off. Like he would not adopt that kind of nonsense. He's not gonna ambush Xi with videos of Uyghurs being killed, because I don't even think he cares about Uyghurs being ill-treated. I don't think he even cares about the Uyghurs if he knows about them. So this is why I'm asking, guys, what does Trump want from us? Richunanda. Because I'm none the wiser after that meeting or what this guy is about. He says they're inundated. There's like thousands of people that are wanting to come to the United States. Thousands of people are going to Australia. They're also turning them away. Australia, they've been going to Australia for the longest time. Even before the genocide started, the supposed genocide started, they've been in Australia. So, and I don't know what Trump wants from us, guys. Honestly, one depress at the money, because I feel like, okay, sharp, we've done what we had to do. They invited us there, we went. Let's come back and deal with some real issues, real everyday issues. Let's come and fix the country, deal with our crime, let's deal with our corruption, and forget about the Americans. AGOA, I think we must carry on and behave as if there will be no AGOA henceforth. Good luck to big businesses out there. Thanks, Kali Krill and co. They've made sure that that's what's going to happen now. AGOA sounds like it's a thing of the past. I don't think we're getting any favors out of the U.S., quite frankly, even if we give Elon Musk his license. And it's quite clear from if reading in between or listening between the lines that we are ready with some kind of a deal for Elon Musk to come and set up shop here in South Africa that won't involve him giving away, or at least giving a stake in, not giving away, but partnering with black businessmen. That much it seems that that's a done deal. What we're going to get in return for bending our laws, I don't know. But it's worth saying that there is a provision that is contained in our law that avoids, what is it? Do they call it a workaround? As opposed to an equity stake in a business. There are other ways that have been put in place to especially make provision for foreign investors to invest in this country. Let's talk. 0861-987-000. WhatsApp 083-303-7093. I want to start first with a professor of international relations at Wits University, Professor John Stremlau, joining us. So, Prof, good evening, and thank you so much for making time for us this evening.
Thank you very much, and I would second most of what you said, and I'm trying to think of where I would disagree.
Okay, all right, then we might as well end this conversation. No, but we didn't bring her on for a debate. But let me get let me just start off with that question about what exactly was at play here. Honestly, up to now, I really thought that this whole genocide story was a red herring. But to see Donald Trump whip out video material and newspaper articles, I was taken aback because I thought, okay, so this guy is serious about this thing. And I'm not sure how you push back against somebody who is so obviously anti-facts, who really is not interested in facts, finds facts entirely boring. Let me just get a sense then of how we are to understand the performance that we just saw earlier on.
Well, I am at a loss to explain Donald Trump, but I will put him in context a little bit. One, he was duly elected for the second time as president of the United States, and that allowed him to suspend the jail sentence that he was convicted of, and he also is allowed to make a lot of money on the side because the founders never imagined Donald Trump in the White House. But never, having said that, what is intriguing to me is the supine way that the Republican Party is backing him. And I think that the Republican Party is in a very serious, determined mood for state capture. We know that America will, by 2040, become a majority-minority country. It's becoming increasingly diverse, and there's inequities like in South Africa, but it is increasingly inclusive. And so whether or not the United States could become a country that belongs to all who live here and united in its diversity is the big issue that Donald Trump is playing to, and the Republicans are going along because they know that they will be overwhelmed by the majority of people, but they're banking on the disproportionate states balance that exists within the Constitution. So it is a very serious moment for the Americans, but it's an American problem.
Yes.
And it's a problem for the Democrats, a challenge for the Democrats to pull themselves together and find a leader who could beat a Republican in 2028. And I'm not confident, but as Arnold Toynbee said, history is one damn thing after another, and so it may be another damn thing. But the Cyril Ramaphosa tonight, for me, was stellar in his defense of the core values of South Africa, and he cleverly worked the galleries by involving the labor union leader. He was great. The golfers, Ernie Els notwithstanding, were great, and Stenhausen was brilliant in his response. And I thought that at least for the galleries outside here, he put the concerns to rest. However, there is an enormously important economic stake that the U.S. offers South Africa, and I don't know what progress was made on that front because this was a show that Donald Trump was putting on for his followers.
Yeah, yeah. Because, I mean, on the one hand, I found that, the president would have, pushed back. There's a part of me that feels like he should have pushed back a lot more on the misrepresentations there by Donald Trump talking about thousands of people being killed and thousands who are at the departures hall as we speak right now. But I guess, the other part of me says, for what? What's the point of that? Because it's not as if it's landing.
With regard to Donald Trump.
Yes.
And yes, that's true. But for the galleries, he did state that the EFF is not in power. And Stenhausen was, again, an emblematic of the government of national unity, which I pray will continue, at least for the duration of the Trump administration, because it gives the lie to everything that Trump is saying, and the rest of the international community is solidly behind South Africa, if only because they feel sorry for South Africa being beaten up by the U.S. and the Europeans might have had disagreements with South Africa's position on Russia-Ukraine, but they swallowed hard and came down immediately after the executive order was issued out of total ignorance of South African realities. But and they pledged 94 billion rand for correcting that in vaccines and climate change. So I think that South Africa did itself credit because it was willing to go into the belly of the beast,
absolutely,
and be beaten up by Donald Trump ineffectively, I thought, and in fact, Trump betrayed his stupidity.
Absolutely. He didn't even seem convinced by what he was saying himself. And it was clear that this was just a coordinated ambush, because he didn't come there with a very clear agenda apart from trying to embarrass our president and his delegation. Because even the questions about the subject matter that I thought he would be passionate about, which is the Israel situation, he kind of fobbed it. I don't know. Let's wait for the verdict. He doesn't even know that this case is a long way from resolved. Is it possible that Donald Trump is actually as ignorant as he comes across, John?
It is possible, and if you read Mary Trump's biography of the family, you can see where it comes from. And he has been a failure at business, and he's been a failure at airlines. And he's been a failure in his hotels, and he got himself into terrible debt, and he had to be bailed out by the
guy collapsed the casino.
Yes, the casinos, and the banks wouldn't lend him money, but the oligarchs did, because they have an interest in and Putin has an interest in Donald Trump reigning in the U.S. But Donald Trump himself is only interested in staying out of jail and making money, because it doesn't have the kind of resources that he pretends he does. And at least, if I can believe his sons and the responsible American press, which has been fairly clear in its analysis of Donald Trump, and they don't like him. And I think that's not because of ideological bias, but it's because of the facts.
Absolutely. John Stremler, Professor John Stremler is my guest on the line. We are just talking about the meeting between Donald Trump and the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, which concluded about an hour or so ago. We'll take your calls as well on 0861 987 000. How you believe that the whole thing went? Do you think the president handled it as best as he could? Do you think there was any point in going there? And John, I'm going to ask you that when we come back, to ask you, do you believe that this meeting would have happened if it were not at the insistence of, were not for the involvement of people like Rupert and our dear golfers? But we'll come back with that. This is the Power Perspective.
When something big happens, we spread the word and tell the world. Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
This is a Power Perspective on Power 98.7. We are taking your thoughts and reactions to the interaction that we saw play out live on television as the President Cyril Ramaphosa met with U.S. President Donald J. Trump. With me, I've got Professor John Stremler, Professor of International Relations at Wits University. Professor John, let me ask you, actually, this thing of having it all out in front of the media, I mean, that's clearly something new since the Zelensky incident. I don't know whether they figured after the Zelensky incident, like, we must do more of this, actually. That worked really well. As you say, their base would have enjoyed that. The MAGA crowd would have enjoyed that. But what's up with that? I mean, where you have out a whole... I mean, it would have been really awkward if I think Cyril Ramaphosa had said at some point that, can we take this inside maybe? I don't want to talk in front of the media. Or I don't know.
Well, look, I don't know a lot about the inner workings of the South African government or the American government, but I see with interest that the South African delegation was a half an hour late showing up. And I think that I predicted that they would not be a repeat of Zelensky circus, and yet clearly the Trump administration thought they had won the Zelensky round, and so they would put another one on. And yet Cyril Ramaphosa is from the global South. He's a black man. and it's very different from Zelensky. But he's also a serious and accomplished constitutional lawyer who reads and studies and thinks. And he was the only adult in that room with Trump, except that he rightly pointed to members of the South African delegation who performed extremely well, I thought, and he knew what he was doing in making sure that they were there, including the golfers, because I dissented from Ernie Elsa's concerns, but nevertheless, it is a free country, and he made that point about Julius Malema. He's not in government, but it's you have freedom of the speech in this country, and Donald Trump is trying to close down freedom of the speech in America, and I hope he doesn't succeed. But if he succeeds in staying out of jail and making himself a buck or two, I'll be glad for him if he just gets out of the presidency. And I don't think he can amend the Constitution to perpetuate himself. And I don't think I pray, but I may be wrong, that the Republicans have a future in the American. They're playing a losing game, but I can't be confident of that because they are ruthless and skilled in the hinterland at cooking the books and making disenfranchising people of color and protecting the white settler class.
Yeah. Let me ask you this then. What, if anything, in your view, is there anything South Africa, at least the South African delegation led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, can put on the table that it's going to change Donald Trump's posture towards South Africa? A license here for Starlink, is that going to do a trick? What are we going to get in return for that? I don't think there's a lot on the table for us here. So
no, there's not. You're right on that score, and I don't want to repeat what you said in your very, very sensible introduction, but I think Donald Trump to change his mind is a lost cause. However, there are enormous economic stakes that are in play, and where both sides have leverage. I mean, the U.S. needs South African platinum. Well, okay, but the South Africans need access to the U.S. market, and they have a favorable trade balance with the U.S., and so they want to protect that because they have to grow. And so Cyril Ramaphosa was right to go there as a weaker member of the bilateral relationship, but at the same time, he is appealing to the best instincts of American life that has been a struggle for 250 years. But the U.S. was formed as an anti-colonial revolution, founded on the principle of all people are created equal. The founders may not have believed that in the short term, but they didn't act on it in the short term. But it was on the books, and it has come back repeatedly all through American history. And so I still harbor hopes that America will pursue the right course of events. But you don't know, and I was wrong about that this would not be a repeat of Zelensky. They tried to do it, but I don't think they succeeded. And I think that Cyril Ramaphosa was a much more skilled politician and statesman than Zelensky, who is new to the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is fighting a war.
Yeah. Would it be folly or would it be risky to say, let's just keep our powder dry for the next 3.5 years and see out Donald Trump? You've been in South Africa long enough to know cricket analogies. The opening batsman has to see out the new ball, stick around as long as he can. Do we see out this Trump presidency and then hope to pick up with a more, I think even the next Republican president will be possibly more favorable than Donald Trump.
It's a safe bet that he won't be any worse, but that may not get you to the real issues that are at stake: growth and unemployment and poverty in this country, which is an inheritance of the apartheid and settler domination, white settler domination of this country for so long, and that's got to be corrected. And the government is struggling to do that, but again, it is an open proposition whether they can accomplish that. And I think that Cyril Ramaphosa is right to try to get this deal done economically, even though it's futile or frustrating. And Donald Trump is not at all helpful. I mean, he doesn't know the history. He doesn't read anything. He doesn't know anything, and he's just interested in making money and staying out of jail.
All right, Professor John Stremlau, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Professor John Stremlau is Professor of International Relations at Wits University. Let's quickly bring in the DA, one of the DA spokespeople. Veli Alkamp, good evening, and thank you so much to you for joining us.
Good evening. Always nice to speak with you.
Are you joining us from the Departures Lounge at OR Tambo International? I'm told there's a lot of you Afrikaners that are on your way out of the country.
Well, I'm joining you from Cape Town because I was in Parliament this afternoon for the budget speech.
Okay.
I think if you look at the people that left, you must look at individual situations. I think, firstly, to say that there's a genocide in South Africa is not true. And I think that our delegation in Washington, although a lot of people might not think that it's possible, I think they will persuade President Trump that there is not a genocide. But as John Steenhuisen said, and I quote him, he said, we have a rural safety problem in South Africa and it requires a lot of effort to get on top of it. It's going to require more policing resources. He also
a rural
said
safety.
that, that was his words. We have a rural safety problem in South Africa. And
I'd say we have a safety problem in South Africa, full stop.
Well, let me just finish, then you'll see what
Sorry.
I will get at.
All right.
No problem. He also called for farm attacks and farm murders to be declared a priority crime. But we all know, if you look at, and that is why I started out by saying we do not have a genocide of farm people in South Africa. If you look at the crime statistics in this country, our crime is out of hand. Mr. Johan Rupert said there that if you look at the crime in the Cape Flats, there's a lot of people dying there. So crime across South Africa is a problem. But I believe that what Mr. John Steenhuisen actually did there was to say, look, we don't have a genocide, but we've definitely got a problem in our rural area. We had a meeting this morning between the Portfolio Committee in Parliament, the Portfolio Committee of Agriculture, and the Portfolio Committee of Police, where we had to do a report on a petition with regards to farm murders. And it was unanimously accepted in the report that farm murders is a problem in this country. And we need to up the efforts for protecting the people in our rural areas. I used the example of the area where I come from, the Northern Cape. If you go to a place called Rietfontein, there's a lot of colored farmers farming in that area who are exposed to the crimes and things that is happening in the rural areas, and they need to be protected. If we put race onto this thing, we are going to lose the fight because every South African is battling with crime. But it is true that farm murders is the only crime that certain people are calling for. When Mr. Julius Malema says, kill the boer, kill the farmer, he is calling for that. I don't care what anybody says. That should not happen. There's no other crime that people are calling for. And what is very disturbing is if you go and look at some of the social media replies when a farm murder took place, It is the only crime where people on social media will come and say, yes, another white farmer killed, happy hooray. It should not be like
But
that.
I mean,
it is unacceptable.
but hang on, Video Camp. Since when is social media a barometer for the or even something to measure the national mood or the national psyche? I mean, the fact that you get a few trolls saying all kinds of outrageous stuff on social media does not make a case to say that there are people that are genuinely on a mission to kill white people. I don't accept that.
The problem is not only they that say that. The problem is leaders that don't renounce that. If we've got a president, and unfortunately our president not long ago said farm murders is not a thing in South Africa, whereas it is. And I think that President Ramaphosa have realized, as we as a joint committee today also said, that farm murders is an issue. You can't go away from that. And you should not cloud what is true. The fact is that although farm murders is a very serious problem in this country, we do not have a genocide. And we're talking about farm murders because the whole issue of a genocide is connected to whites being persecuted and killed in this country, whereas it's a total crime problem. And that is why we are referring to this.
You see, the genocide thing, I think, is part of a coordinated effort to try and elevate the deaths of white farmers in this country above any other deaths, including the deaths of farm workers on those farms who die, some of whom die at the hands of their employers. But murder in this country, as Johan Rupert so eloquently pointed out, is the biggest problem amongst the biggest victims are black people. That the capital of murder in this country is the Cape Flats. It's not some farmland. No one is saying farmers are not dying, because people are dying in this, as Zingiswa Losi of Kosatu put it. We are a violent country, so there's a lot of violent crime in here. This thing about genocide, it's just part of elevating white deaths above those of blacks. That is why when you have white people who are supposedly desperate to get out of a country, they get sent a chartered aircraft to come and fetch them. Black people who went into exile under apartheid had no such luxuries. You should go and maybe have a chat with some of your MP colleagues and ask them their path into exile and where they went and where they landed. They were not received by some government official when they landed there. So
I've done that on numerous occasions, and this is what I'm trying to say to you, is that we should not racialize this. I think you and me agree. We should not racialize this. It is not about white people getting murdered or black people getting murdered. One murder is one murder too many. One rape, whether it's a white woman or a black woman or a colored woman, I don't care. It is too much. And the fact that we are now talking about farm murders is precisely due to the fact that President Trump called it a genocide. And I'm saying to you that there is no genocide, but we cannot say there's no genocide and just rub off the table the fact that we do have a huge problem with safety in our rural areas. And it is black farmers, white farmers, farm workers. In some cases, white people are farm workers. In other cases, black people are farm workers. It's irrelevant whether it's a farmer or a farm worker. It is a South African person, whether it's black or white, I don't care. We need to look better at our farmers, farm workers, and the people in our rural areas, irrespective of their race. Yeah. And we should also, and I think that is one of the good things that came out of what we saw on TV tonight, is that John Steenhuisen asked for it, Ernie Els, as well as Johan Rupert asked for it, to get the help of the United States to assist us precisely with our crime problem in this country. Johan Rupert mentioned drones, he mentioned Starlink. If we can get assistance to properly tackle crime all over the place, it would be fantastic, because we do have a huge crime problem. I mean, the lady from Kusatu said that we are a violent nation. I think there is a large generalization, but we do
That's a
have a
fact.
lot of violent people in this country, unfortunately, and that is the reality.
We are a violent country with a violent past. We can't discount that, or we can't ignore that fact. But Willie Okamp, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keep well.
Willie Okamp is the DA spokesperson. As Professor Spamandla Zondi is standing by to chat to us after this.
If it's happening in your country or around the world, Power 98.7 is your eyes and ears. Now we're talking.
All right, let's get some perspective as well from Professor Spamandla Zondi, who is a professor of international relations at politics and international relations at UJ. Professor, good evening, and thank you so much for your time this evening. Let me just get your first thoughts, your initial thoughts on what we saw earlier on this evening.
Good evening, and good evening to the listeners. Yes, definitely. It was expected that it was going to be tense. The Oval Office in the White House has become a slaughterhouse for many who are unsuspecting and unprepared. And I guess everybody's prepared after Zelensky. If you look at the other engagements after Zelensky, they've come off much better. And Trump has always wanted to rattle some feathers, but has not been able to rattle anyone after Zelensky. And I think President Ramaphosa was very well prepared for this one, and he's a generally calm person, generally a diplomatic person, generally very somber person, and I think it was extra so. This time he had to put up all his expertise as a negotiator, as a lawyer, as a businessman, to try and do this. And I think the greatest benefit for it is the public rebuttal of a lie. The lie has gone on for a long time. It's gone on without a public answer to it. If you look at it carefully, there has not been a public response to the idea of a white genocide. And it's so good that there was that platform Trump created, instigated for a public rebuttal of this, so that history would record that this allegation was refuted, and then you can choose what you go away with. It would have been a horrible thing for an idea of this nature, a myth of this nature, to go on for a long time without any public and formal rebuttal. And I think, lastly, it was really good that there was also an attempt to focus the entire discussion on the need to strengthen bilateral trade, to show that South Africa needs trade with the United States, but the United States also needs trade with South Africa. All of that that's for me very important. Of course, the ambush with that video on Malema and others was meant to rattle the feathers, and I think the South African side held their composure, and that helped.
I got to ask you what I asked Professor John Stremler earlier on, Professor Zondi. When all is said and done, I mean, especially based on exchanges there in that meeting earlier, in terms of the issues that Donald Trump wanted to raise, whatever the burning issues are, I'm nine that wise. Donald Trump,
a deal. He is a deal president. He is willing to go very far to get some deal. The trade between South Africa and the U.S. is in South Africa's favor in terms of the balance, but it's a significant area of trade. The second one, South Africa likes working through multilateral means, so we are part of AGOA and all that. And Trump does not like that. He wants to deal with individual countries and all that. So he's on a mission to undo all the multilateral or trilateral arrangement, so that when they sit on the table, then they're looking at a deal. What's the deal on technology transfer? What's the deal on trade? What's the deal on the importing of Ford companies, for Ford goods and so on and so on. He's looking for a deal, and is willing to go into great strengths to find a deal. He's a transactional president, and he wants to go on of this. All the other drama require a thick skin and ability to almost ignore it and look beyond it but rebut it with facts for the purpose of historical record.
Do you really think? Yeah, okay. I like what you just added there at the end, for the purposes of historical record, because I was about to say it doesn't sound like Trump really cares about facts, but as you say, it's not about Trump; it's about the watching world as well.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Because if you let him have the final word, whatever myths he's come to believe, whatever untruths come to believe, become part of the historical fact.
Yeah.
You can undo it in retrospect, but that would be in retrospect. It would have already taken root.
Yeah.
So it's important that you're not talking to convince him. You're talking to convince everybody else that are also watching. You're very aware that you're not talking to Trump, but you're talking to the U.S. Audience, which is generally naive. It's a naive audience. Whether Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. It tends to be very malleable and gullible and so on.
Ignorant?
Yeah, quite strong word, yes.
It's a strong word, but I'm afraid it's not too far from the truth. I think if we did a sample of 100 Americans, randomly picked Americans, and you asked them pointed questions about South Africa, I think half of them wouldn't even know where South Africa is.
Yes, I mean, they're ignorant of other people. They're very, very aware of themselves.
Yes.
They're very aware of what they want. They're very aware of how powerful they are. And they're very aware that they can use that power recklessly. So they're not fools. They're very aware, but they just don't have this sense of the world outside themselves. And I think because they've been dominant for a long time. All the empires, before they collapse, they live in what is called audacity of self-belief, believing everything you say to yourself.
Absolutely. They love navel gazing and looking in the mirror.
Yes.
Prof, quick one. As a professor, if you were grading Cyril Ramaphosa this evening, what mark would you give him? What kind of grade would you give him?
I would give him an 8 out of 10, actually.
Wow.
In relation
a distinction,
to the
no less. Huh?
Yeah, the purpose he needed to serve was to start a conversation.
Yes, yeah.
It may not be a two-way conversation. It may be a dialogue of the deaf, where you're talking to yourself and the other side is not listening. But you start a dialogue all the same.
Yeah.
Because in the end, people are able to tell who is a fool and who is a wise person by looking at the conversation.
All right.
If you don't reciprocate, we would then think you lack maturity. But he needed to start a conversation because what the conversation has been happening with AfriForum and Washington has been happening without a challenge to it, without a response to it. He needed to start the response. The second, I think for me, the kind of team he assembled, a lot of questions about having those business people there, the white capital, but he needed to demonstrate that the white leaders and dominant figures do not buy the idea of a genocide. It makes it so difficult to let it stick if the people who are supposed to be genocided are saying they are not. So it's important to bring that angle. Yeah, but
Professor?
The proof would be the pudding. What is negotiated on the table in the end is what will tell us whether this was a success.
Thank you so much, Prof. I appreciate your time.
You're most welcome.
Here we go. Professor Spamandla Zondi, Professor of Politics and International Relations at UJ.